How many of you have heard of Haywood Waterways? Raise your hand. Well, of course I can't see it, but I hope a lot of you are raising your hand. If not, Haywood Waterways, we are a membership-based group. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that works on the Pigeon River watershed of Haywood County. And our mission is to protect and improve our rivers, streams, and lakes. And we do that through education and engagement of the community. And you'll hear a lot more about that as I go through this presentation. But we also work in partnerships to find the financial and technical resources to restore and restore our degraded streams and protect the ones that aren't. So first I want to talk about just Haywood County's waterways in general. And there's a lot of information here, and I'll try to go slow, but I understand that you'll have access to these slides that you can just pause it and read through the information if you want to. So the first thing I'll point out is just Western North Carolina in general. That includes Haywood County, some of the best water quality anywhere in the world. And I would argue that point strongly. So, and you can see a fact here. It's old, but I think it's still true that clean water and air were two of the most important factors when people consider where they live. And so Haywood County, really interesting facts here, has one of the highest watersheds in the United States east of the Mississippi. And I think that's a pretty neat fact. And you can read here how many mountains are more than a mile in altitude, and that we are in the Pigeon River watershed. That is a tributary to the French Broad River. The state has the Division of Water Resources has the state divided up into 7 basins, and the French Broad River is a main one. And of course, Pigeon River is a tributary to the French Broad. It doesn't meet the French Broad until it gets into Tennessee, and of course from there it goes to the Ohio, and then ultimately the Mississippi, and it comes out the Gulf course and the Gulf of Mexico. So here's a lot of facts that you can read through, and I'll just skim through it. One thing I want you to point out, one thing I want you to notice is just how many acres are in public lands. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the Blue Ridge Parkway, our national forests. And having that land protected has been a real benefit for keeping our waterways clean. And so we appreciate those lands. Notice how many miles of streams we have here. Almost 1,700 miles of streams. Now, a lot of those are perennial, meaning they run year-round. Some of those are intermittent, meaning they might dry up a little bit, especially during drought conditions. And then there's ephemeral that really are only present when heavy rains are around. We do have waters considered high quality and outstanding, and those are based on state standards that they're meeting, meaning they're the best of the best, essentially. And of course, we do have many miles protected for our water supply watersheds. And if you've ever wondered where you get your drinking water, here you go. A lot of us living in the country get their water from a well, but if you live in a municipality, you can read through here, Canton and Clyde get theirs from the Pigeon River itself, the Upper Pigeon. And Maggie Valley gets theirs from Jonathan's Creek, and Waynesville gets theirs from Allen's Creek, the Waynesville watershed. It's always good to know where your drinking water comes from, not just from the faucet, not when you turn it on, but work backwards and you'll see, you'll find out where it comes from. And of course, it has a lot of value to us. And I want to kind of go through those first, kind of setting the stage for why we protect them, why we do what we do. And of course, tourism, a big draw for the area. And of course, during this pandemic, you see a lot of license plates from out of state, people getting out, wanting to do stuff outdoors where it's safer. And of course, the local residents wanting to get outside and do something. Well, you can see just how much tourism has grown over the last 20 years, 30 years. And I don't have recent data from 2019, but I'm really curious to know what the data will be in 2020. But it's continuing to grow. And we use it for fishing, paddling, sightseeing, watering golf courses, lots of different uses for water. Fishing, of course, is a very popular activity And you can read through here the study done by Wildlife Resources Commission many years ago, just what the economic value is of the trout industry in western North Carolina, $383 million. But Haywood County is one of the more popular counties for that. And so of that total, there's a large percentage of that coming from Haywood County. And you can see a great fish caught from the West Fork of the Pigeon. There's a lot out there. I've seen them firsthand, as I'm sure many of you have as well. I'll point out here Lake Junaluska itself, a great draw for the county of water. Brings in about $40 million per year in economic value to the county, and it draws a lot of visitors as well. And I'll come back to this about our issues, but if they didn't dredge it, it would eventually turn into a big wetland and there'd be no more lake. So we can't forget agriculture, where our food comes from. We need water for irrigation, for growing our crops. And you can read some facts here about the number of farms we have in the county, and as well as what their value is too. So a very important part of our economy and our health and well-being. And of course, we can't forget wildlife, the importance of clean water. So the southern Appalachian Mountains, where we're located, some of the highest diversity of salamanders, darters, freshwater mussels, caddisflies, than anywhere else in the world. So the tremendous diversity that is here is because of that clean water we have, the abundant clean water. Here we have a tangerine darter. That you see the fish here, as well as what we nickname a flattened scraper mayfly. Just two examples. But we also have, of course, the hellbender salamander, a very unique and interesting organism. One of only a couple known anywhere in the world of giant salamanders. And we can't forget, a lot of the organisms that we find underwater are also supporting food webs outside the water, like bats, great blue herons, ducks, and of course, who's at the top of the food chain? But humans. And so one of my favorite stories when we talk to kids doing our education events is who here likes to go fishing? Who here likes to eat trout? And of course, we get a lot of folks raising their hands. Then I ask them, well, what do trout eat? Well, they eat other fish, sure, but they also eat other insects too. And of course, that draws a few funny faces. But then I ask them, what are the insects eating? And they might not know that, but ultimately I tell them it goes down to the leaves. And so those leaves growing on those trees along the stream every fall, when they fall into the stream, they really drive that food web that ultimately ends in trout and ourselves as well. And so that always gets a lot of funny faces from the kids, but it helps make the connection. I see a lot of light bulbs go off when the kids realize that. So that kind of summarizes all of our water resources and their benefits and their abundance. Now, we do have issues, and I want to touch on that right now. And a lot of when we call streams with issues, degraded streams, we're in a lot of ways talking about impaired waterways. And one of the guidelines we use to judge if a water is impaired stems from the Clean Water Act that's passed down responsibility to the state, and the state has what we call a 303D list. And that list is the streams that have the biggest problems. And the state will go around every 5 years, they'll come back to Haywood County and they'll sample a variety of different streams for all kinds of different parameters. The organisms that live in the water, pH, different chemical parameters. And if it doesn't meet their standards, then if it's really bad, they'll put on the Impaired Waterways. But if it's somewhat bad, there's different categories. And so here I've created this list of the most recent 2018 data from the state. There's a lot of information there, but you can read through it. Category 5 is the streams that are the most degraded. And Category 4, still a big concern, but not so much. And thankfully, a lot of our streams are what we call Category 1 and 2, and they're pretty good streams. So we focus a lot of our efforts, Haywood Waterways, on these Category 4s and 5s. And in this far right column, you'll see the reasons for their impairment. turbidity, meaning there's a lot of solids, sediment in the streams, water temperature, but you also see some of them with fish and benthos. Benthos meaning benthic macroinvertebrates, or the insects and crustaceans that are living in the stream. And so what the state has determined is that the fish and the bugs that they collected in the stream, they're not finding the ones that they would expect to find in our streams. Maybe they're finding a lot of organisms they call tolerant of pollution. And they don't know exactly why they're not there. So when they put a stream on, for example, for fish community, it means there might be issues with too much sediment, poor riparian cover, temperature is too high in the water, any number of reasons. And so what Haywood Waterways can do is then try to address all those issues, and eventually it'll affect the fish community, the benefit, and then we'll start to see improvements in that. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit when I talk about some of the successes that we've had. So what does all this, the impairment, the degradation stem from? Well, a lot of it comes from population growth. As more people move here, as our local residents have kids and they grow up and they build houses, when we're changing the landscape from pervious, forested land to impervious surfaces, meaning rooftops, roads, sidewalks, it allows more stormwater to run off the land. And that's really our biggest cause of pollution in our waterways. So as our landscape changes from pervious surfaces to impervious surfaces, every time it rains, instead of being absorbed into the ground, that water flows off the rooftops, off our driveways, flows downhill, eventually finds a storm drain and carried directly to a stream. Now along the way, it picks up what we call non-point source pollution. The easiest way to explain what that is an industry that uses water as a discharge pipe, where once they use that water, it goes out that pipe into a stream. And so that's a point source. So non-point source means water that washes off landscape, a parking lot, comes off a farm field, comes off a residential yard. And when it does that, it picks up cigarette butts, fertilizers, pesticides, pet waste, any number of different pollutants, and it washes them into a stream. So it's not necessarily a point, it's over a broad landscape. And the state, they have a permitting system to regulate point sources, but there's no way to regulate non-point sources. We all contribute, and so we can all also contribute to their improvement. So they like to work with grassroots organizations like Haywood Waterways to implement broad-scale solutions, and eventually we'll see improvements in the stream. Again, I want to talk a little bit later about some of our successes and solutions. You'll see that that actually works. So here we have some slides. The number one water quality problem in the U.S. is stormwater. And these aren't my slides, but I was given permission to use these. You can kind of see some fun graphics. And there we go. This is a great way to explain why stormwater is such a problem. So you can pretend that you're in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and it starts raining, and we get about an inch of rain. And this is what we call a hydrograph. You can see if you're standing next to a stream, you might see that water level rise and then slowly dissipate over time back to its normal level. But if you change that landscape to a shopping plaza and that same 1 inch rain, now our hydrograph looks something like this, where the water's coming, more water's coming faster with a whole lot more power to it. And we might see images like this driving down the highway, in our city streets. And of course, this is an extreme example back in 2004 in Clyde when the big hurricanes come through, all the flooding that it can cause. And so these are a lot of the non-point source pollutions that we are looking at. And I already mentioned some of these. I'm not sure I mentioned the sediment though. It's our #1 pollutant. And I have a talk more about that in a second. But something interesting you might not know is we call thermal stress. All of our waterways in Haywood County are cold water streams. Trout, they love cold water. Mayflies, stoneflies, they love cold water. Temperatures around 69 degrees or less year round. If temperatures get above that, then it can stress an organism out. They might stop feeding. They may not reproduce, cause problems. They might die off, would be the ultimate extreme. So imagine yourself in a shopping center parking lot and you're bare feet in the middle of August. You're not going to be able to stand there very long because it's going to get so hot. Well, that asphalt will absorb and trap that heat energy, and eventually it's going to rain. And that heat energy is going to get transferred from the pavement to the water. Water will flow downhill to a stream, and all of a sudden water temperatures start to rise. We have temperature gauges in Richland Creek, a trout cold water stream, that shows in September it hits about 80 degrees. And if we look back and think about the economic benefits and the personal benefits of just fishing and the trout industry, you know, that can impact those benefits. So thermal stress is a big issue around here. Another big issue around here is also fecal coliform bacteria. And that's bacteria from warm-blooded animals. And it's not necessarily, that fecal coliform isn't necessarily the issue itself, but what's associated with warm-blooded animals and the waste coming out of us, humans included. E. coli, dysentery, gastroenteritis, all the kinds of nasty viruses that get in our water. And the sources from that can come from failing septic systems, broken municipal sewer lines, livestock access to streams, even our pets, if we don't pick up pet waste. That can all contribute to that issue. All right, so sediment, you can read through here some of the biggest issues why we're concerned about it. Think about trout. Where do trout lay their eggs? Bugs. Where do the bugs live? They live under the rocks. Well, if we had too much sediment, that sediment covers those rocks and it destroys the homes of where those organisms live. Think about a farmer irrigating their crops. They have a pipe in the river. If that pipe gets clogged with sediment, they have to go out there and unclog it, which takes time, takes money. And I like to tell kids, if a farmer has to pay somebody to do that, the price of their crop might go up. And if your parents have to pay more money for the food, that might mean less Christmas presents under the tree at the end of the year. I always see a light bulb go off with that. Like I mentioned about Lake Junaluska, it could fill in if they don't dredge sediment. It leads to increased water treatment costs, higher electricity costs, all kinds of different reasons of why we care about sediment. And these are some of the issues, I should say some of the sources where we find them. Eroding stream banks. Remember that slide I showed you about stormwater? And I'm sure you've seen it after a heavy rain. Stormwater in our streams, there's a lot of power. And streams want to go straight. But streams don't go straight. And when that stormwater hits a turn in the stream, it's going to erode that stream bank. And the stormwater is eventually going to win. So unless we can do things to protect, stabilize that stream bank. Mountainside roads, eroding ditches are a big source if they're not maintained correctly. We've all heard of landslide issues around here as well, big contributor of sediment to our streams. And of course, here's a classic picture of livestock in the stream. You got direct deposit of waste, a poor riparian conditions, trampled stream banks, lots of sediment coming in the stream. You may all recognize this picture when we see Lake Junaluska drawn down and all the trucks and machinery in there trying to dredge that material out. So there's no shortage of sediment in our streams. Here's a great slide of Richland Creek on a warm summer day, kids playing in the water. The state standard for fecal coliforms is 200 colonies per 100 milliliters. You can see this is well above that. Now it might be okay with them that day, but You never know what other viruses might be in with those fecals. And non-point source pollution, when it rains, it's carrying more than one type of non-point source pollution. And it kind of creates a soup. And I love this slide. It's a great image of how those pollutants could interact and cause bigger problems. We just don't know what's in the water. So I would like to add at this point, before I get into the solutions, that anyone is certainly welcome to contact me or other staff at Haywood Waterways. If you have any concerns about our waterways, want to know things that you can do to help, go to our website, haywoodwaterways.org, and you'll find our emails and phone numbers for that. So that's the end of my presentation about the issues, and I'm going to talk more about solutions here next. So Haywood Waterways works on a diverse array of solutions to help tackle this non-point source pollution. But one of the first things we have to do is monitor our streams. And that helps us identify which streams are having issues, what those issues are, because we really need to know that information in order to justify the grant funding to fix that. We don't use the monitoring information to point fingers. It's non-point source pollution. We all contribute. But we can use it to help really get those financial and technical resources. That's what we really want, to create those win-win situations to help water and help the property owners. So we sample, in our monitoring, we sample sediment, temperature, biological. Here's a few slides on that right now. Here's what we have: a stormwater sediment set up. Every time it rains, the water level rises and fills up these little bottles, and we can analyze the concentration in that. And you can read through some of the data that we have, or some of the biggest issues are. We also do computer models. This is based on the Tennessee Valley Authority model. It's time for an update. Last information we have is 2007, but I want to say it's still pretty accurate, knowing how our streams are functioning these days. They took a plane and flew over every inch of our county, taking aerial photographs, and then some poor intern sat at a computer for 8 months, poring over that information, trying to find out where the eroding stream banks are happening, where a failing septic system might be, where poor streamside vegetation might be. And then we can use that to model pollutant loads. And back when I said our biggest issues, how do we know that? Well, this is one way. We got eroding stream banks, eroding roads as our biggest sources of sediment. And that was consistent between the two IPSIs, we call them, Integrated Pollutant Source Identification. Data was consistent between 2000 and 2007. We also have a very long-running volunteer water chemistry sampling program. And it's been going on for a long time. It's a very long-running data set, which of course is very critical for helping us see trends, how they might vary by season, by rainfall, and of course by stream. And so that you can read through some of the parameters that we look at: pH, conductivity. And right now we have 24 active sites scattered throughout the county, providing really valuable information. We also sample the biological information. Chemistry is great because it gives us a picture of what that water is like the instant we stick a bottle in the stream. The issue with that is, once the bottle comes out of the stream, some kind of pollutant might come through and we never see it. But by understanding what organisms live in the stream, we get an idea of what that water quality is year-round. Think of yourselves. We breathe air. What happens if that air goes bad? Well, we get sick, we could even die, or we move away, find another place to live. And so it's the same with the organisms that live in the stream. There are organisms that really hate pollution. They're going to die off or they're going to move away. But there's organisms that they may not love the pollution, but they are tolerant of it. And when the other organisms leave, that opens up niches where those pollution-tolerant ones can thrive. So when we go out there and sample what bugs live on our stream, and I can pull out of the water, such as this stonefly right here, or that mayfly again, I can identify it by name, and then I know what its tolerance value is. Does it love pollution? Does it hate pollution? And if we find a whole lot of organisms, actually really just a few organisms that are intolerant, that's a good sign that water quality is pretty good. But if we find a whole lot of tolerant organisms, that's a big red flag that something's wrong with that stream. And that goes for the same with fish. Now, Haywood Waterways doesn't sample fish, but Tennessee Valley Authority does, Wildlife Resources Commission do, and that we can get the data from them as well. So that monitoring information, very important for us. So what are some of the other solutions that we work on? Well, Haywood Waterways, we focus on education, and we also focus on restoration. And that restoration side of things, we work in partnerships with folks like the Haywood Soil and Water Conservation District, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, with each of the towns, with grant funders like the Pigeon River Fund, the State 319 program, Clean Water Management Trust Fund, and of course the property owners, can't forget them, all working together to find the technical and financial resources to do that actual restoration work. So grant writing is a big specialty that we have. And then as well as once we get a grant, working with partners, working with contractors to implement them. So here are a few examples of those restoration projects. Remember, stormwater is our #1 cause of pollution. So I'll start off talking about some things, some ways that we mitigate stormwater. And this is what we call a Bio-Swale. Best way to describe it is just a glorified ditch filled with rocks, designed to slow that water down. And if we can get some to infiltrate back down into the ground, that's great. But there's also plants that are typically living inside or on the edge that help absorb any fertilizers, even some water running through there. So Bio-Swale is a very simple thing. Most importantly, to help slow that storm water down. And when it slows down, it's not going to overwhelm a stream. It's not going to have concentrated storm water in that river or stream getting through there. Bioretention, we also call these rain gardens. Kind of looks very similar to a Bio-Swale, but this is designed to capture and hold that storm water and usually drain down back into the ground within 24 to 48 hours. And we have plants that are put in the ground in these that are designed to absorb those nutrients, absorb water, and help reduce that storm water. And you can see in these two examples, we have overflow. If there's too much storm water coming in, they're designed to overflow and get that storm water out of the way. And this one out at Bethel Elementary, you can see these PVC pipes coming out of the ground. They are collecting water from all the gutters coming off that rooftop. And rain gardens can be different sizes, from large to small, even small that are suitable for private homes. Here's another example out of that Bethel Elementary with a constructed wetland. Wetlands are fantastic for mitigating stormwater, but these, as you know, can hold water for longer periods of time. So we talk about mosquitoes, they're not always welcome. But when they become populated with frogs, maybe even fish, they can take care of that mosquito problem. But wetlands are great at mitigating stormwater. And in all three of those examples, I mentioned those plants. Here you can see a close-up of, say, the root system. That the plants are absorbing some of those nutrients, but also the organisms that are living on those plant roots. They help absorb a lot of the non-point source pollutants. So other mitigation techniques we can use to reduce stormwater impacts is storage. And that could be as simple as a rain barrel at our own house, or some large cistern or other structure buried in the ground. And what we see in this picture right here is from the Bethel Elementary School. That's in front of the school, right on the main road there. And remember I mentioned that rain garden had an overflow? Well, that overflow goes to this. And it's buried underground, so helps reduce that temperature and storm water. But notice the bottom's gravel, so it helps that water infiltrate back down into the ground. And notice that those structures look like milk crates. Well, that material, that surface area, allows a lot of microbes to grow, and that helps eat up all that non-point source pollution that might be in the waterways as well. So those are great underground storage for controlling non-point source pollution. And of course, you might see these in your own development where you live, simple sediment traps. Designed to capture water, sediment falls to the bottom, water flows out the top. So there's a lot of different variations of these, but they are prevalent throughout the county. So now we'll get into one of the biggest issues is, as I mentioned, eroding stream banks as a result of that stormwater. So when we fix an eroding stream bank, here's a great example of the Lake Junaluska Golf Course. You can park at the Greenway parking lot right there where Highway 19 turns into Delwood Road there, right by as soon as you meet the lake. And just walk a little bit upstream and you can look through here and you won't even notice it because it's all grown up with vegetation. But that's what the project is you're looking here. A pretty bad eroding stream bank, what did they do? Well, they pulled the slope back at a much easier to handle 2-to-1, 3-to-1 slope. They put in special rock structures or rock veins, and these are designed, notice, you might be able to notice that this actually goes uphill as you travel downstream. Well, anything travels uphill, it works against gravity and it slows down. And then it simply pours over those rocks back into the stream, and those rock channels are great at keeping water in the middle of the stream away from the stream bank. And in this case, we have those rock channels on both sides of the stream. But if you go down to the Richland Creek Greenway at Waynesville Rec Center, you can see these rock veins on one side of the stream, on a big bend in the stream. So there's some special engineering techniques, and I'll leave it to them on the design when they have to account for discharge and width of stream and all kinds of different parameters. So not necessarily something we can do on our own at our own homes without some engineering advice. But one of the biggest things that we can put in these restoration projects that really provide the best long-term protection, because rocks move during high stormwater events, is streamside vegetation. We've all seen a tree fall, and what's left behind are these giant root structures. And if you look real close, those root structures go down to finer and finer threads to about the thickness of our hair. And those little hairs are what's really holding that soil together. And it's not just usually one single tree on the stream bank. Ideally, we have multiple rows of trees, 20, 25 feet or more back from the top of the stream bank. And those deep root ball systems are really what's holding those stream banks together. And anytime we don't have those, such as in this picture, grass roots, they don't go down very far, especially the non-native ones. Native grass, they'll go down a lot further. Grass does a great job of stopping erosion from rainfall from the top, but it doesn't do a great job from below what's coming from the streams. So that's why we like trees and shrubs, stuff with deep root balls. It doesn't have to be wild. It can be ornamental trees. We like natives. It can be blueberries, azalea, things that look good. So if you got a yard needing some help, we can definitely help fix that. So here's an example within the town limits of Waynesville. Had a steep bank and a driveway in the way, so they put in some benching in there, put in some plants that took hold, and it's doing a great job of holding that stream bank together. Of course, farmers, livestock is a big issue, but we need our livestock for our milk, for our meat, big part of our diet. So we can't just tell a farmer not to stop their work, that's impossible. But we can help them by fencing off the livestock from a stream. That allows that streamside vegetation to grow back and protect the streams. But of course, cattle, sheep, they need a watering source, so we can dig them a well, provide a central source away from the stream where they can get their well. We can also do feed waste structures where they go to eat away from the stream. And for that, we work really through the Haywood Soil and Water District and the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. They're the farm experts, so we rely on them for that. We have helped out a few homeowner associations, some developments. Mountainside roads are a big issue, big source of sediment. So There's very few situations where we'll advocate for paving surfaces, but this is one where, depending on what an engineer says, might be a good solution, depending on the steepness of your road. If you can protect that road surface from eroding and direct that water to a ditch where it can be properly handled, pavement might be a good solution here. But really, it's a lot of the big issues with Mountainside Road happen when it gets to the ditches, especially long stretches of ditch with one culvert. What allows that water, that stormwater to concentrate, get a high volume, can overwhelm that culvert, get around it, undermine it, and start eroding at that road. I see a lot of examples of that throughout Haywood County. So really, when we talk about mountainside roads and ditches, you really have to put in more culverts to really spread that volume out. And there's a good way to grade roads too. If you're not going to pave it, you really want to grade that, put a crown in it. Don't grade it flat, because then water just runs down the middle of the road. But if you put a crown on it, then half the water is going over the edge, and then half the water is going to that ditch. So right there, you've reduced that ditch volume by 50%, and less likely to overwhelm your culverts. And there's other things you can do to protect those culverts. Put in rock structures to help, again, when that water hits it, it slows it down. And then it flows over and hits the next one and slows it down. Put in a whole series of like that can help keep our ditches in place. One of our most popular programs, and this is addressing that fecal coliform bacteria issue, is helping homeowners fix failing septic systems. And to date, this slide's actually a little out of date. I'm sorry I didn't update it, but we're up to about 160 repairs since we started this program in 2006. And I'm always amazed by this fact that each repair eliminates as much as 360 gallons of untreated wastewater. That's coming from the toilet, coming from washing our dishes, from the shower. 360 gallons of that each day. So multiply 160 times 360, we're up to about 60,000 gallons per day. Multiply that by 360 days in a year, it's a pretty big figure. So it's a very popular program. The funders love it because it's instantaneous benefits for water quality. Disconnected, that straight pipe essentially from the stream, and getting that water being treated. So we're not anti-development. We are, however, promote sustainable development. And there are ways to do that. I mentioned some ways to maintain your roads and ditches. But if you take a step back, and we can start at the planning process, working with designers, if we can lay out some of these subdivisions, these mountainside roads, understand where the best places are to put a house, and then a house that's not going to fall off the edge of the mountain, then you know where to put the driveway, then you can know where to put the roads to access them. Instead of the traditional way of just plow a road through and then figure out where to put the houses afterwards, isn't always the most successful way. So we got a program working with some of our partners, resource assessment for mountainside development. And here's a great example of Jonathan's Creek, that a road was going to go up the side of the mountain, houses on either side. But working with a developer, he got less houses in there. You know, of course, the developer, they're concerned about their bottom line. So they got less houses out of it that might affect that bottom line, but they're putting in less roads, and that saved them a lot of money that way. And of course, if the houses are stable, then that developer gets a better name recognition. More people like to move to stable houses and don't want it falling off the side. And so in this situation, a lot of the houses got built at the top of the mountain rather than on the side. So that's more of an educational type activity that we're helping developers and designers work with and let them take these plans and use them as they want. But we also do a whole lot of other education, such as giving presentations like this, although we don't do too many virtual. I like the live stuff. But we'll create special publications and distribute those. We mail things out as postcards. We'll do a lot of social media, Facebook, email blasts, all what the new ways of doing those things. Always adapting to reach new crowds. So 60,000 people that live in Haywood County, so there's a lot of different ways we need to work to make sure we reach all those people. You might see some of our signs out along greenways, driving down the roads when you cross over into a different watershed. We hope you are seeing those. We put up displays at the Waynesville Public Library, at different festivals, at different events. We'll help promote meetings to get people at the table. And really, all these education events, all this work that we're doing, we really believe that's the best long-term solution to protecting our waterways. And that's really developing what we call environmentally responsible behaviors. If someone can work that into their daily lives and just think to turn off the faucet when they're brushing their teeth, or to wash their car on the grass rather than in a parking lot, or go to a local commercial place that recycles their water. If we can build those things into our daily lives, then we're really making a big step forward in protecting our water resources. Then imagine if everyone was doing that. That would have tremendous benefit for the long-term protection of our waterways. And a lot of that starts with our youth. And so this is our classic program, Kids in the Creek. It's a Tennessee Valley Authority product that brought to Haywood County. And I believe we're the second longest running Kids in the Creek in their TVA basin. I think there's one in Virginia that's a little bit longer. But this gets every 8th grader out of the classroom to the Canton Rec Park, where they put on waders. I'm amazed at the number of kids that never put on waders. Get them in the stream, flipping over rocks. I grew up next to a stream, flipping over rocks. And I'm always amazed at the number of kids who've never seen an insect before. And there's a big wow factor with Kids in the Creek. And we've done it for 22 years now, and I encounter people on the street. If I know they're local, I ask them, did you go through Kids in the Creek? A lot of them say, yes, I remember that vividly. It's a great time and I learned a lot. So there's a lot of impact with Kids in the Creek. We do a pre-event and a post-event survey that documents they do learn stuff. And we're always happy to see that result, especially because when we go into the classroom before Kids in the Creek, these are cool 8th graders, half are asleep, not paying attention, passing notes back and forth to their buddy. But we get them outside, we get pictures like this. Big wow factor. Wow, I never knew this was here. So in 22 years, we've reached almost 15,000 kids. Big success story. But why should kids have all the fun? So we started this program, Leaders in the Creek. And if you want to participate, we invite all our adult citizens. We also invite our public officials, business leaders, community leaders, all to come out here the last day of Kids in the Creek and do the same things essentially. We typically hold Kids in the Creek 3rd week of September, so Leaders in the Creek would be the 4th day, that Thursday of that week. However, this year I should say it's all getting moved to the spring to accommodate the school schedules. And we're probably doing a lot of stuff virtually. But hopefully 2021 or soon after, we can get these kids outside, get their hands dirty again. We do storm drain stenciling. We want to raise awareness of that stormwater issue and not for folks to use it as a dumping ground for oil, grease, cigarette butts. So putting these stencils on, we hope, raises awareness. These storm drains, they don't go to a treatment system, they go directly to a stream and discharge any kind of pollutant directly to our stream. So I mentioned streamside vegetation. We like to promote native vegetation, help support what our local organisms are used to feeding on, what provide good habitat, not always provided by some non-native species like Japanese knotweed like you see in this picture. So we try to get folks out there involved directly with our restoration work, and this is a great volunteer engagement activity. We focus a lot on the negative, the degraded streams, but as you all know, I hope Haywood County has a lot of beautiful streams. So we have this program, Get to Know Your Watershed, that gets folks out on hikes, paddle trips, scuba diving. You know, let's go out and see these beautiful places, what we're worth protecting, what our degraded streams could look like if we stay focused and work to improve them. So very popular. It's been on, not as active because of the pandemic, but we're slowly rolling activities out. And so keep an eye on our Facebook page and your email for these announcements. One of our most popular programs is Adopt a Stream. And every time the wind blows, every time it rains, there's trash going in our streams. And I'll remind you, think back about those tourism figures that I showed you. Clean streams draw people here, support jobs. And if our streams are dirty, people might be less likely to come to Haywood County. And for our own residents, trash is unsightly. We want our streams to look nice. We want our area to look nice. So Adopt a Stream, that's our focus, pick up trash. And we've had a lot of success since we started this in 2009, up to about almost 60,000 pounds of trash, 30 tons removed since then. And we've had a lot of different groups involved, schools, even individuals taking on themselves to do that. And if you're really interested in this, just today, go to our Facebook page. You can see an announcement for our Bucket Brigade, where an individual or family can come pick up a bucket filled with cleanup supplies, trash bags, gloves, pickup sticks, and go out and clean up a stream on your own. And the organizer, Christine O'Brien, has a list of sites where we have permission and have issues with that. And then, yeah, again, clean up on your own. Let us know how much you cleaned up, and it's a great way to be involved. We're involved with a regional effort here, something we call Mountain H2O Pro. And again, I'll remind you, we're not anti-development, but there's a way to grow sustainably. And this is a way that we train the builders and their employees, the guys with the shovel, on the bulldozer, how to control sediment runoff when they're building something. The state, the county, they have great best management practices that they developed that work great if they're installed and maintained correctly. A lot of times they're not. So this is a training program that shows them how to install it as well as maintain it. And if they see a problem, what to do. We work with these folks a lot, and they want to do what's right, but oftentimes they don't know how to do it. So this is a great training that we're involved with. And we're going to be planning one this winter. And watch for announcements. If you're a contractor, watch for an announcement. You are welcome to come. So that kind of ends our solutions. And I will say this point right here, is that Haywood Waterways, we're a small staff of 3. We get a lot done. I like to think we're pretty efficient and we get measurable results, but we can't do it alone. And for that, we rely on partnerships. Very important. And you can read through this list here. But it's also our members, our supporters, and the property owners as well that are very important to help us get our work done. So before I leave, I want to stress a couple points here that really clean water starts with each of us and what we do on our own properties. You know, what can you do? Pick up pet waste. Direct your gutters into a vegetated area. Educate your neighbors, educate your family. Join Haywood Waterways. We're a membership-based organization, and so we rely on your donations as the base of your support. But we don't just sit on that. We leverage about $22 from other sources, grants, fundraising activities, for every dollar you donate. So we put it to good use. And we do have an endowment fund started to help us for that long-range planning, the success of our organization. It's difficult a lot of times to get administrative costs from grants, but so we started an endowment to help fund our staff in the long term. So if you're interested in that, please contact us and we can provide more information about that. And thank you. I appreciate your time, appreciate your patience going through this. I know I can talk a lot, but I get excited about water. Again, if you have any questions, want to talk about water, go to our website, haywoodwaterways.org. You can find our phone number and our email. Thank you.